Hi everyone and welcome. I'm Diane and my passion is painting and creating in my studio. Every day I share a video with you on YouTube in which I paint and create all sorts of nature-inspired pictures. I also share loads of tips on how to make the most of your painting journey, interrupted fairly frequently by our family of dogs, cats, chickens and sheep. So welcome on board, click subscribe and turn on notifications and let's learn to paint watercolour. Hi everyone, welcome to my studio. Today we're going to paint a water lily and this is my reference photo. It's a photo I found on the internet and I've printed it out. And to paint this water lily I'm going to make it the main feature of one large water lily sitting in a fairly abstract way on a mat, if you like, of water lily pads. So see how close they all are together here. I'm not going to make a feature of the individual shape of each water lily pad, but I'm just going to have one isolated flower surrounded by a kind of abstract sort of background, which we're going to develop as we go along. We'll see how that goes. And I'm going to use three main colours. I've got permanent rose here, that's a ROWNEY colour. I've got olive green. I think this one is says transparent yellow on it, but it isn't. That's olive green, and I'm pretty sure that's Schminker or Winsor & Newton. This is quinacridone gold by Winsor & Newton or Schminker or whoever. I might use a little bit of cobalt blue. I might use a little bit of Winsor violet, quinacridone violet. I probably will use some yellow for the centre of the flower. It doesn't show very much on this one, but I've enlarged it and brought it forward a bit so you can see the centre of the flower a little bit better. And I'm going to try to paint the water lily in a transparent style, the same way that we did the poppies the other day. I've partially traced the outline on here. If you go to my website, dianeantone.com, you'll be able to download the sketch and you can trace that out. Saves a lot of time worrying about the drawing, so just trace that out and then you can get started. And I'm just rubbing off some of the darker lines now that you've seen it. Somebody mentioned that they couldn't see the drawing on the screen the other day, and it's always a bit of a compromise, because if you make the drawing dark, then of course it shows through the paint, and if it's a transparent flower, like for example the pansies and so on, too much line work can be a bit intrusive. I suppose it doesn't really matter because it's only my painting and it's only for demonstration, but I wouldn't want to give people the idea that you can use a huge amount of pencil and then just rub it all out, because of course as soon as you put paint over the top of it, it's kind of fixed in place, isn't it? I'm going to need a nice big brush to brush that off. There we go. I won't use the feather for that because there's too much of it. Paint gets everywhere, doesn't it? I haven't even started and I've got a yellow dot down there. Anyway, never mind. So I'm not going to paint this wet in wet. I'm going to paint it in the place where I learned how to do this technique. We called it veils, transparent layers. And the first thing that we're going to do is to come in and put a transparent layer of pale pink over the whole painting, with the exclusion of the stamens in the middle, the yellow part there. So you could mask this out, do the background, and then take off the masking, but masking fluid and me aren't very good friends, really. So I'm going to start at the back here, and this is the first layer, and this is going to be painted in petal by petal without any attempt at shading or anything like that, because that will come later. And just to be picky, I'm not going to overlap. I'm not going to do all of them in one big sweep. I'm going to paint each individual one separately. It doesn't take all that long. And the reason is because I want them all to have slightly different amounts of pigment on them. So as I go around, obviously I'm picking up more paint. That one's in the water, so I shouldn't put anything there. So just quite loosely, quite quickly, don't need to worry too much about time. I don't mean that. I mean you don't need to worry too much about, what do I mean? I don't know. I think I'm having a hot flush. Yes, right. So anyway, just paint. Don't listen to me, just paint. And with any luck, when you're listening to this, you'll have some nice music instead of my dulcet tones whittering on in the background. So we'll just paint around the stamens there with these ones. Okay, that was there. And the thing about this method is, as I said before, the longest and the most tedious part of it is that you have to wait for it to dry. So that's one of the reasons I don't use very thick paper. If I can get away with using thinner paper, because it dries more quickly, it doesn't absorb as much water. Now I'm going to put some pink in these petals, because this is the reflection on the water, sort of, kinda. But I'll be painting over those. So we'll just do those really quite lightly. And I'm going to sort of go over the edges there a bit because I want them to be a bit blurry. So now we have to wait for it to dry. So I'm going to go and feed the dogs and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so the first layer of the actual water lily is done. So now what I'm going to do is, using a reasonably large brush, this one probably could be bigger, but I'm using this one because I need to get in around the petals. So I'm just bringing in plenty of clean water and just literally wetting the paper behind the water lilies, and then I'm going to make the whole of the paper wet. Ruby, really? Yes, and then I'm going to drop in a wet in wet background wash, if Ruby doesn't mind. I think she's got other plans. But I'm determined to do this now. And use plenty of water, but don't make it sopping wet, but just enough so that the colour, when you come in with the colours, is going to spread quite intensely and give you a good background colour. And the colours we're going to be using will be quinacridone gold, cobalt blue and olive green. And together I'm hoping those will make a pleasant background with something resembling the idea of water. I'm going over the pink area underneath the lily there, just because that's just going to be a sort of reflection stroke shadow. And if you look at it from sideways on, you can see, just make sure that you've covered all of the background, and you can tell where it's wet because it's shiny. And then I think I'm going to start with quinacridone gold, and I'm just mixing it in my little palette, so it's a fairly intense wash. And then I'm just going to drop some of that in there, and without too much in the way of brushwork or too much manipulation, just drop that in. And then rinse out the brush, pick up some cobalt blue, and then we're going to put that here and spread it around a little bit so it can run. Don't fiddle. This is a very good opportunity to practice the non-fiddling principle. And we're going to bring a slightly stronger blue coming down here. When you do this kind of thing, it's really best not to have too much in the way of preconceived ideas about what you're going to get, because it won't be that happens, but we hope that something pleasant emerges, don't we? Plenty of water in your mix. Don't make it too runny though. You want a nice lot of colour, because watercolour always dries much lighter than it goes on. And then over the other side at the top here, we're going to put some green, some actual green, like that, and some more yellow. And if when you're doing this you think to yourself, lily pads, water, with any luck, that's what you'll paint, even if you're trying not to. You don't have to use these colours. You could use darker colours. You could use quinacridone violet or purple or mauve or Windsor violet if you wanted to make it more dramatic. You could you could have that with, you could do that with burnt sienna. That would be fun. And I'd probably also use what's it called? Olive green. It's amazing how hard it is to think of names for things when you're painting. I don't know if you've noticed that. I find it very difficult. So yes, you could do that. Purple, dark green and burnt sienna would make a very interesting colour scheme. But I thought this would be quite nice because it's summer. And when this dries, you might get some back runs, but it doesn't matter because, I mean, a back run is probably going to look a little bit like a lily pad, if anything. And there might be one there, for example, but don't worry about it. And we're going to do another layer over the top anyway once it's fully dry. So things to remember, you need to have plenty of light, so you're going to use plenty of yellow, whatever the chosen yellow is, if you want a light effect like this. So I've got plenty of quinacridone gold. And then nearer to the flower itself, I've put blue because that's where the lily pads are going to be. And then a little bit in the distance there, a little bit darker, a little bit more green. That's the olive green. That will dry several tones lighter. And I'm going to leave that overnight so that it is absolutely, totally, completely and utterly dry by tomorrow morning. And then we'll come back to it. So I will be gone for 12 hours, but I will be back in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. So this painting is so far now dry, and we have to carry on making layers of colour. And but first of all, I'm just going to pop in the stamens, which are yellow, like that, with a little bit of quinacridone gold dropped in just for variety, and just leave that to do its own thing. And I'm using quite a big brush, and the idea of using a big brush like this is a 14, is to keep things loose and to make sure that you don't stick to the edges too closely, because you can't. So now we've got a row of petals around the back there, which are going to be probably the ones with the most shadow in them. So we're going to start dropping in, this is a mixture of cobalt blue and permanent rose, and we'll just start shaping up the petals a little bit that are in front by dropping shadow in behind. And we'll vary that colour, and we'll also get rid of the sharp lines, most of them, by just dropping some water in and doing a bit of lost and found edges there. And so we want to vary the colour of the shadow as we go across, and just dropping in more pink. Here, there's not very much blue in this over this side. And we might even, when we get over to this side, we might even think about putting a little bit of sunshine in there too. And this has to be done on a kind of it's a bit scary. I always find this stage really quite hard because it is an intuitive thing and it can fail, you know. And what's failure? I don't know, it just doesn't look right. You have to work harder at it. That's what it is. If it is not working out properly the way you hoped, then you need to just work harder. And so who wants that? Nobody. So I'm going to carry on down into the center part, and I'm going to deliberately allow some of that yellow to bleed up a little bit there. Not too much, but just there. And we'll put some shadow there, which has got a little bit of yellow in it. And we'll break some of these hard lines. And once I've done this layer, we'll have to let it dry and come back to it for the next layer. So just mixing it. It's really very, very thin, the paint. It's hardly got any colour in it at all. So this side of the flower I've made a little bit more bluish. This side is going to be a little bit more pinkish. And we will work on building that up. What we don't want to do is have it all the same all the way over. That's not what the idea is. So a bit more pinkish on this side and a bit more bluish on the other side. Not forgetting to break these lines, lost and found lines, very important at the early stage. Keeping it all very light. And then we have to remember that we do have a bit of reflection or shadow in the water underneath, so we'll just add a little bit to that. And then, so we let that dry, and in the meantime we're going to start thinking about the background, which has dried really quite nicely. And so I'm going to start thinking about putting in some darker blues, perhaps with a tiny bit of mauve in there to make it more of a navy blue. Some darker blues behind. So where it's the darkest already, then we'll come in with a bit more dark. And don't go over your yellowy areas too much, because if you do that, you'll end up with a grey painting. So just think about a bit more blue behind the petals. You can let that run a bit down here. And then over this side as well, probably. Or maybe we'll just carry on up here first of all. Don't forget your lost and found edges. And then we'll probably want to put some blue down here. kind of make the water look a bit darker in places, and so it looks a bit like light. And I think we'll emphasize the blue over here as well. Maybe we'll drop a little bit more pink. I'm thinking not sure how I'm going to put at the moment, not sure how I'm going to put the shadow underneath, but it's probably going to have to be mauve. And it's probably going to have to go up a bit like that. Okay, and I'm probably going to have to let that dry now because it won't take very long. Yeah, you don't want to paint, when you're doing layers like this, you don't want to paint on top of damp. So that's going to have to, so I'm going to turn you off and I'm going to have a cup of coffee. But it's looking okay at the moment, getting some interesting movement down here. So we'll let that play itself out and see what happens. So it's dry now, so I've switched to a slightly smaller brush. This is a size 11, synthetic round as before. And now I'm going to carry on working into the petals with shades of pink and a little bit of blue. This was the original photo, and so you can see that the background has got hints of what's going on in the photo. And I'm hoping that we'll pick up something of the flower as well. Noticing when you look at the photo, quite a lot of the delineation is where the shadow is on the outside and it's lighter on the inside, or if it's the back of it, it's all dark. The key is to make sure you have contrasting areas of dark and light, and so on. That's the important thing that gives it the shape. This is light and this is dark and so on. So I've got a very light one here, and I'm probably going to darken up a bit here, keep this light. I don't know, just have to see how it goes, but it's not going to be as dark as that at all in any case. Okay, so we'll start to continue. I'll put some pink in the back here. Apart from having it in your mind that you're going to put light and dark next to each other, and to more or less be aware of what the shapes are, you need to try to paint a little bit intuitively. It might not look like it's going to work, but you hope it will anyway. Also, the key here is knowing when to stop, when you've got it to your own level of satisfaction. Then it's best to stop before you go too far. Put a little bit more in there for the stamens. And I think probably want a bit more bluish. I like the way cobalt blue blends with permanent rose. It makes nice lilacs. I used to use a lot of ultramarine, but I don't use as much of it now. I prefer cobalt, it seems. I don't know, it goes better with the colours I'm using. It's violet, quinacridone violet. And maybe we'll put a bit of that in some of the petals. Okay, like I said, it's slow, this process. It's meditative. It's best to let it have it take its time. There are days when it works and there are days when it doesn't. And you have to be patient and let it dry in between. I'm just trying to get rid of a bit of background that shouldn't be there. And same here, just correct that a bit. Oops, see. You can see there's a danger of it going too dark here. So I'm going to grab a piece of paper towel, just lift that out and let that dry. There's a danger of it going too dark here too, so that bit needs to go. If you're using good quality watercolour paper, you will be able to lift colour out. And then you just need to let it dry. That's better. And when you've got a blurry line like that, you can either leave it, it's not a problem, or else you can come in with a bit more background to sharpen it up. Quite pleased with the way this has kind of run around here. I quite like that, it's quite pretty. Another tip, if you want to do this kind of painting, I have found that if you take a photograph of it and look at the photo, or if you're handy with the camera or whatever, you can take some video of it and look at it through the eye of the lens, and you'll often see faults or ways that it could improve, or you'll even see things that look better through the camera than they do to your actual eye. It's quite strange, but it does. It actually is quite strange, isn't it? It's almost as if the camera can see better than we can. Like we were taking some pictures of flowers and birds and bees and things the other day on the camera, and standing there looking at them in real life, but being able to see them better on the camera. It's just very strange. Sometimes very, very tiny amounts of paint will make a big difference. So what I'm doing here is painting a little bit of shadow into the water. I'm hoping that's going to bring the flowers forward a bit, but I'm actually painting behind the flower. I'm using quinacridone violet for that. And there, that's cobalt blue. Always remembering that colour dries, unless you're using core paints, which dry very similar to what they go on. If you're using ordinary watercolour, you can expect it to fade back quite a bit. That's too dark. A little bit too much yellow. So I'm lifting that out. I think it ran too much. And also I'll lift it off of there. And then I'll let that dry and then repaint those petals behind. And then I think I'm probably going to call it a day. It probably needs a little bit of work in the background, perhaps, but I think the video is probably becoming long enough. So let me let that dry. I'll be back and I'll just finish that off with you. Okay, so I'm going to paint that one in the background, I think, and just need to look at my original paint, what do you call it, photo. There we are. That'll do, I think. Oh, wait a minute. Let's just tidy that up a little bit. And kind of optional really to darken it down here a little bit. You could work up the background a lot. You could really make the background a lot darker. But I don't think I'm going to. I quite like it like this. Maybe a bit more blue here, perhaps. So we'll just darken down the bases of the petals now. So where your shadows have naturally fallen as you were painting, we can go in and strengthen them a bit. Try to look at the whole painting as you're doing this, not just at the bit you're painting. I know that's not easy. And then you need to soften that by coming back in with clean water. Just lost and found edges. When you find yourself needing to resist the urge to fiddle, when you think to yourself, oh, should I? Maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, then it's probably time to stop before you go too far. So I think I'm going to stop. I'm going to leave that to settle, and I'll come back after lunch and just check that everything's okay. But I think we're nearly there. Okay then, so this is now dry, and I'm just going to put a few little blobs of spatter here and there, just using my large paintbrush here. Just a few drops, just to break up the surface of the water. I'm not going to do anything else. I'm going to call that done. I hope you enjoyed watching me do that. And give it a go. It's a lot more complicated than the little water lilies I did the other day for the sketch, but same kind of idea. 3 colours, basically just 3 colours. So if you did enjoy that, please give me a like and comment below, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications if you wouldn't mind. And while you're at it, take a look at some of our other older videos that have been going up every day. There are literally hundreds of them now, and you're very welcome to go back right the way through the catalogue. Go to the channel and look under videos, or go to the playlists and have a good explore. We're going to start putting up things for Halloween and even thinking about Christmas soon. So that's also going to be really exciting for this year. So I'm going to let you go now, and I hope to see you back again here tomorrow, and we'll have another chat. So bye for now, everybody. Bye bye.